All right, Florida State has finished their first spring scrimmage. We've been talking about it all week as they lead up to their second scrimmage of that spring. We are doing something that you guys asked for. We've gotten a bunch of questions on. We are projecting Florida State's depth chart, what that might look like based on not only what we've heard, but what we've seen in the spring so far. We'll do this off and on. I don't know that we'll do it every week through the spring, but we'll definitely do it one more time, probably after the spring game. Maybe a couple of times between now and then, but after the spring game, and then we'll do it again as we get close to fall and as fall camp starts, and then we'll certainly do it once LSU week arrives. Let's get right to it. Richie, most important position on the field, pretty solidified at the top, but then there is a bit of a battle there behind Jordan Travis. What you guys see on the screen, so my slideshow here is my projection. This is not necessarily Richie. I'm not speaking for him, but this is what I'm projecting. So I've got Jordan Travis as the starter, not really stepping on too many limbs there. If you watched yesterday's video, which I'll link down in the description and above right now, I think A.J. Duffy takes it. Now, I will say this. If LSU week, like I said in the other video, if LSU week was this week, I think I'd have Tate there in second, but I'm projecting ahead. So I'm telling you that based on right now, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, I've got AJ as the backup. Now, I think it's pretty splitting hairs there because we're pretty far out from LSU. We're still like 6 months away. But I got Jordan, AJ, Tate, and then I do have Brock fourth. I'm really impressed with what Brock has done so far. He still is just a true freshman that's been on campus for a couple of months. He's still the fourth-string quarterback. Richie, thoughts here?
Yeah, I definitely think you can leave Brock out for now, right? Because he's not going to come into factor until the 2023 season, which is what we are talking about. But, I think there's the possibility of a 2013 spring replica where, Clint Trickett transferred out after he realized Jameis Winston was going to be the clear starter. Does that happen with Tate Rodemaker and A.J. Duffy? I don't know. I tend to agree with you that Tate Rodemaker would be the clear backup after right now if the LSU game was this week. But, that LSU second or Louisville second half still is fresh in my head. So I still lean a little Tate, so a slight disagreement. But what we've heard from A.J. Duffy, he seems to be really putting it together. Shout out Tony Tokars and Mike Norvell because it sounds like the development is definitely happening.
I like it. I like it a ton. I think the biggest thing with me for Tate, and I said this in the other video, is that I think that he may have hit a ceiling. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just think AJ has room to grow, and that's why I think that through the spring and maybe even through the fall, AJ will overtake him. But you're completely right. This whole fan base doubted Tate during the second half of the Louisville game, and he proved everybody wrong. So if he wins this job, he could prove me wrong again for the second time in less than 12 months. So, all right, running backs, again, pretty solidified here at the top. Trey Benson as your starter. Lawrence Toafili probably backing him up. And then Florida State really does have a trio of backs behind him. I'm going to cheat and do what Florida State does when a depth chart comes out. On my graphic, I've got Campbell or Holmes or Hill. That said, when we get to fall, Rodney Hill might be one of the best running backs that is on the right. Like, he might just be neck and neck with Trey Benson. So I am going to cheat right now. I've got Trey Benson and Toafili as 1 and 2. But I think Rodney Hill is going to step up and do some pretty special things. I think Isaiah Holmes will have a really good year. And I think C.J. Campbell is a really, really dynamic running back as well. Florida State has, I think, 5 very capable running backs there in the backfield. But that's my order right now. Trey Benson, Toafili, and then you've got kind of the group of 3 underneath.
Yeah, it's just an embarrassment of riches. And Mike Norvell has done an amazing job going back to Memphis, Arizona State with the running backs. Trey Benson's the clear number 1, right? And this is how good the talent is for Florida State. The clear number 1, Trey Benson, you don't want him getting more than 13, 15 carries a game because you don't need to. Toafili's more of a gadget player. Like, you can use him anywhere. And then you have just a ridiculous amount of talent behind them where any of them could come up or step up and make some real things happen. DJ, we talked about this a little bit beforehand. Don't be surprised if one of these guys is not on the team after the spring. There's just not enough carries and touches to go around.
Yeah, that's a good transition time. I have probably not at the time this video is released. I'm trying to be careful with somewhat what I say. I do have some list of names that I'm being told are potential targets to hit the transfer portal. I know that the DMAC news broke this week. McClendon jumped in the portal just due to some things that he was working through. Honestly, some rep issues. So I think that there are more of those guys that are going to enter the portal. I've been clued in on a couple of them that we would probably expect. Some for good reasons, some for not so good reasons, right? But either way, if you want to check out our Patreon, it's patreon.com/DFNS. You can also join the channel as a member, and that gets you access to the Discord, where we will drop that probably on Friday. So this video comes out Thursday morning. We'll probably drop that on Friday, just some news and names that we're hearing. Could also be Saturday after the scrimmage. I want to see how those results look as well before we jump all the way into telling you who may or may not be leaving. Wide receiver, again, this first three positions, pretty easy at the top. Jordan Trey and Johnny Wilson there at the top of the wide receiver list. Okay, I cheated a little bit on this one too, Richie. I know you can't see it, but I've got Winston Wright as my clear number 2. I'm loving what he's doing. I think with Pittman going down, obviously Pokey Wilson gone, I think that Winston Wright is your number 2. Number 3, I've got 4 guys there at number 3. I've got Kentron Portier, I've got Deuce Spann, I've got Ja'Kai Douglas, and Darian Williamson. So I've got 4 guys there at number 3. And then I've got Hakeem or Vendavarius Jacobs also getting in there and mixing it up. That's where I'm at right now. And so I'm kind of going back and forth between what I'm projecting for the fall and what I've got coming up. But I think Jacobs and Hakeem could easily move up. I think you could see somebody in that 3rd spot transfer out. I'm being told, again, a name or 2 in that one. So join the Patreon or the channel so you can get access to that info. But thoughts on the wide receiver group?
I think we might disagree a little bit on this group. I think every name listed that you see will contribute in one fashion or another this season. Johnny Wilson, the clear number 1. That's obvious. Winston Wright, I'm super excited about, but I just need to see and hear more about him coming off of that, that horrific car crash on spring break last year where, he could have lost the leg potentially. I'm really high on Deuce Spann and Williamson, and I think those could be your top 3, Wilson, Spann, Williamson. Ja'Kai Douglas, obviously a matchup nightmare if he gets lined up against a running back. Kentron is a guy that's just been slowly improving every year and just very consistent. Hakeem's the wild card, and Jacobs has been the king of the spring so far, a term a lot of people likes to use. But, man, if looking at this list right here doesn't get you excited about a wide receiver room where nothing personal or no offense whatsoever, a few years ago, Keyshawn Helton and Pokey Wilson were the top guys. What a flip Ron Dugans has done to redeem his career.
Yeah. Now, wide receiver is an embarrassment of riches. If I had to project for the spring right now, I'd have Johnny, Winston Wright, I'd have Hakeem number 3, and then I'd have everybody else kind of split. Like, that would be my top 3. But Jacob sounds like the real deal, and so we'll see kind of how those guys get in and mix it up, if Hakeem's able to grow enough or what that ends up looking like. All right, let's give a quick shout out to our friends over at Gramco. You can go to thegramco.com. You can get all of your Delta 8 needs, whether you're looking for gummies, vapes, pre-rolls, whatever you are in the mood for or in the market for Delta 8-wise, they will get you taken care of. Thegramco.com. You can use TJ25. You can use DFNS25. It doesn't matter. However you usually listen to us or watch us, use your favorite code, save 25%, and they will get you taken care of there at checkout, thegramco.com, the leaders in the Delta 8 market. All right, so another fun one. I'm cheating all over, but this is my depth chart, so I can do whatever I want on these and cheat as much as I want. I have, for tight end, this is not too hard, I don't think. I have Jaheim Bell with an asterisk, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Then Kyle Morlock, then I got Brian Courtney down there at the bottom and Marqueston Douglas rounding at number 3. So I don't know why I just said those backwards, but I did. I've got Jaheim Bell with a asterisk by him because I don't know how often he lines up at tight end. What I'm hearing and what people are telling me is like he can line up literally anywhere. He can line up as a wideout and just be like a nasty A.J. Brown type receiver. He can line up in the backfield. He can split into the slot. So I've got him as a tight end here, but that's just because that's how he's labeled on the. I don't know that he's really taken that many tight end 1 reps. He could just fit into that wide receiver unit. And so then I do think, you've got Morlock who had a really good scrimmage. I do think that both Marqueston and Brian Courtney are going to have good years and be productive, but I really think that Morlock is just kind of your prototypical tight end. Might be a little bit of I don't mean as a diss to those other guys that have been on the roster longer, but I'm going to go with Morlock in that second position and then the other two rounding it out. So, Richie, thoughts on the tight end?
Again, Mike Norvell just has to be salivating at looking at this room because he loves using the tight end. If you go back to his tape at Arizona State and Memphis, I just think he's going to get creative, him and Alex Atkins, offense coordinator, and find a way to get two of these guys on the field at a time, potentially three in a jumbo set. Yeah, Bell's the most versatile. We saw that at South Carolina when as a tight end he played running back several games. Morlock is your typical, he's not a Gronk or a Kelsey, but he's got those measurables, right? And it'll be fun to see what he turns into. And don't sleep on Biscuit. I think Courtney, we may not hear a lot from him this year, but I do not expect Bell and Morlock to be here beyond this year, and Courtney could be at the top of the list next year. Again, a room that had been very not exciting in recent years, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, how do we split the ball between all these guys just in this one room that doesn't get the ball very often to begin with?
Yeah, there's way too much talent on this roster. Something I don't actually believe, but something that is fun to say. Offensive line. This one, I'm not cheating as much, but I do have a lot of oars on this. And the reason why is because there are a few things that need to get worked out. And so I think Robert Scott is locked up as your left tackle. And I think that ends up being what you end up getting out there. I am almost certain of that. I think anything else could change up and could move around. I think Casey Roddick does get a starting spot, whether that be at left guard or at center. I think you could also see Maurice Smith get that center position if Roddick locks up the left guard. I think that right guard is going to be, so the right side of the line to me is going to be some mixture of Byers, Emmanuel, and Washington. If Emmanuel's waiver doesn't get approved, I think you could see Byers or, you could see either one of those guys play their position. I think Byers definitely gets a starting spot. So I don't know what that means if Emmanuel's waiver gets approved and he plays that right guard. Maybe Byers is your right tackle. Maybe Washington's your right tackle and Byers has to play guard. So I think some combination of these 6 guys, 7 guys, I guess, with Emmanuel in there with his waiver, will be your starting offensive line. And so I didn't just put 5 guys in because I think there's some uncertainty with what's going to happen with Emmanuel's waiver. I do think that Keandre Jones is a guy that has a little bit more to prove, and he needs to do a little bit more for him to earn a starting spot. I think that Armella and Early, I think some of these other guys could also get in there and mix it up, but I just don't know that they're ready to start yet. And so that's what my starting offensive line looks like. Not very definitive, but I'm getting closer as we get closer to the end of spring.
Yeah, and I think Scott's definitely got left tackle locked up. Casey Roddick doesn't come in not to start. I do think he gets one of those. But I do think Malicious, Maurice Smith, does lock down the starting center job. I think Byers has a nice edge over Dimitri Emmanuel because of the waiver situation. Emmanuel not able to participate in spring, and I think Washington makes the most sense at right tackle. But I think for the first time in a long time, you feel really happy and are really comfortable about the depth at the offensive line. Sure. There's been years in the past where you're like, okay, I really like 4 or 5 guys, but if one guy goes down, this is a problem. That's not the problem this year. You have the depth. Alex Atkins deserves a ton of credit. He's flipped this room, and the offensive line is the least of my concerns when it comes to this team this year.
Yeah, no, and like I said, the depth in that room is kind of, I don't know, just nicer than it's ever been. I think you could legitimately have 2. Yeah, there would be a drop-off, right? Your top 5 are your top 5 for a reason, but you could legitimately pull 10 starters out of that room with especially if Emmanuel's waiver is approved. So, and he was, as much as, he was really good last year. So, especially in the run game. So, all right, defensive line. Let's go to the edge position. This one's kind of easy. I feel like, especially with McClendon going and what we've heard on Pat Payton, I think Verse and Payton are your starters. I think Gilbert Edmond and Byron Turner are going to get a ton of looks and a ton of work. And I think Lamont Green Jr. will get in here and there. But I think those are your top 4. I wouldn't be surprised if Florida State goes to the portal and tries to get one more defensive end through the summer once it opens up on the 1st with the departure of Derek McClendon. I think you're a little thinner there than you'd like to be. You'd like to have McClendon in that mix if you could have. But top of this one is obviously really, really easy. You've probably got a top 10 draft pick at the very top. And then you may have another top 10 draft pick in 2 years with Pat Payton there. on the other side. I do think he gets the starting spot, and then the other guys kind of mix in and fill in post that.
Yeah, you hate to see McClellan go because he legitimately, I think, would have been a starter for us this year. But him leaving when he did mid-spring, I mean, talk about extra motivation for Pat Payton. He has to know now, and I'm sure Papuchis and Norvell are saying, "Hey, you're the guy now. You need to step up and be ready for fall camp. You cannot wait till fall camp." So I definitely think it's first. And Peyton Gilbert Edmond showed a lot of good flashes at South Carolina. I'm really excited about him. And then Byron Turner and, like you said, Lamont Green Jr. Like you said, we have to go to the portal and get a depth piece here. You're not looking for a starter at defensive end, but you're definitely looking for someone who can add some depth, fill in if needed at any given time. But, you love the talent here, but you can't really love the depth just as it's constructed right now.
Yeah, I think that we have big expectations for this defensive line, and so it's going to be nasty, but I think you can always improve upon depth. Defensive tackle, I think this one's. I don't want to say that this is easy, but I think Fabo and Fisk end up being your starters. I mean, certainly Fabian Lovett didn't come back to not start. I think Darrell Jackson, you're still kind of waiting on his waiver. You're still waiting on that to go through. I do think that gets approved, but Jackson, Farmer as kind of your next two, and then I think Briggs and Ao are two that are very underrated. And I was talking with somebody close to Tafasi the other day. He's getting back into it. He wasn't participating in the first little bit of spring, but he is now. And I think again, this is one of the stronger units on the team. Heard that Fabo has looked pretty ridiculous this spring so far. I'm excited to see what Fisk can do. He was the best defensive line transfer in the portal. Jackson coming from Miami, and then Farmer, who I've heard is unblockable right now. So I'm excited to see what these guys can do. I think this unit is going to be the best on the defense, even though Verse is, maybe not. Maybe Verse and Peyton. But anyway, this defensive line is going to be the best in the ACC, one of the best in the country.
So I would actually have it a little different here. I would have Fabo or Fisk or Jackson. I think the starting two comes out of those three. From what I understand, man, Jackson just looks different, right? He looks like a player that gets off the bus at Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State. He's made an extreme impression on this team. If that waiver comes through, I would not be surprised to see him start. I agree. Fabo, Mike Norvell's big on loyalty, I think. So I would think he has a starting job lined up. But if Fisk and Jackson are that much better, you never know. I think the luxury Florida State has here is it doesn't matter because you don't want any of these guys playing 60, 65, 70 snaps a game. You want them playing closer to 40, 45, 50 on the high end. And with the talent, with little drop-off with depth to include Farmer and Briggs. I mean, it's just a great spot for Odell's group to be in. And you cannot be bad about it. And I think, again, limiting snaps on these guys, they're going to appreciate that as well because they all have NFL aspirations and they don't want to be playing 70, 75 snaps a game. Just a good situation for Florida State at this position group.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I think that, I saw a stat that, I think it was, is it Gervon Dexter that was at Florida? Played something like 671 snaps last year, which is just an absolutely ridiculous number for a defensive tackle. And he is really, really good, and he's going to be drafted very, very high. But I think for these guys that do want to go to the NFL and don't want to get that much tread on their tires and don't want to just absolutely wear themselves out. I also think that you're looking at the fact that Fabian Lovett has gotten hurt a couple of times, and I mean Braden Fisk came in here in a sling, and so you're taking some of that risk away from them. And when you are more fresh and you are more healthy, you do have less injuries, and so I do think that that's a big part of it too. The rotation of that defensive line is going, the depth there in the rotation is going to just help all things. Backing it up, we've got a couple more positions to go, and we'll get out of here. Again, we've shared a lot of insight, a lot of news, notes. We've also shared a couple of people with our Discord in our Patreon on the channel membership, other guys that may be looking to jump in. If you want to support, if you want to help out, you can join the channel below. I think it's like $3 a month. I mean, it's something outrageously low, and then YouTube takes most of it. But we do get a couple pennies off of it. So if you want to support and you want to say thanks, you're more than welcome to join the channel there. Linebackers, again, pretty easy starters here. Kalen Tatum, DJ. Nice to get that entire starting unit back. I like what Gant, Omar Graham, and then a little bit of Blake Nicholson will bring behind them, but a pretty clear pecking order of your top three, and then the guys that'll back them up.
Yeah, you don't love the depth here, but Kalen DeLoach has come miles from when he first came here. Tatum Bethune's been what we thought he would be. DJ Lundy, you'd like to see him take the next step. Brenda Gant, he's one of those guys you're just happy he's still around because there's something there. Omar Graham, a young guy, we'll see what happens. And Blake Nicholson, I don't expect much this year. We're already over the scholarship limit, so there's a couple positions you'd like to go find one in the portal. Linebacker's probably one, but I don't think the numbers work out. But you really like what you have on the starting front, and just hope they stay healthy this year.
We will move to cornerbacks. This one, again, was pretty easy. Here's where I like Fintrell Cypress to take your cornerback 1. I think Renardo Green takes cornerback 2. I like Jarian Jones, who I think had a good year last year and really rebounded and grew toward the end of the year. And Azariah Thomas at your third cornerback. In the nickel, I like Greedy Vance and Kevin Knowles. I know there's other guys here in the cornerback rotation that certainly could have added. I ran out of space. This is what we've got for tonight. But this is kind of how I see the top of your cornerback depth chart shaking out.
Yeah, where things stand after one scrimmage, I don't see any reason to disagree with any of that. We'll see how it plays out at the end of spring. We'll probably do another one of these and then fall camp. But this is probably what you're looking at heading into the week 1 week 1, not a week 0 of LSU.
Safety, again, fairly straightforward to me. I think Akeem Dent and Shaheem Brown are your starters. I think Duke Cooper does move back to safety. We talked about that. We predicted that. That's also been reported by other outlets as well. The great guys at Knowles 247 have also talked about that being a likely scenario. And I think Travis Jay. A lot of people ask about Travis Jay. I think that he'll get in there and mix it up somewhat in the back. They really like what they have with the young guy, with Conrad Hussey. I think you could get in and mix it up some toward the later part of the year, kind of like Azariah Thomas did last year. But anyway, I think this is another one that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. A lot of questions on Travis Jay all the time. Hopefully this is the year that he kind of gets in and mixes it up and has a really good year. But I think Akeem Dent, Shaheem Brown at the top of that is probably what you're looking at from a safety position.
Yeah, I think if you're, Florida State, you would have really loved to have Conrad Hussey enroll early and not be a summer enrollee, but we'll see what happens. But Travis Jay, there's reasons he did not play last year. We believe he's going to be eligible and will play this year. We'll see what happens. But, he's a ridiculous athlete. And the fact that he's still around after all he's been through, that tells me the coaching staff does think there's something there. So we'll see what happens.
When we move on to the last position, specialists, I know there's a little bit of a competition there at kicker. I still got Fitzgerald winning this thing out. I think he played much better down the stretch through last year. Obviously god-awful start to begin the year, but I think he got better. I think the competition is going to be good for him. I think it's pretty easy to project him as your starter now. Mastromano, kick returner, I like Benson back there. That might change up just a little bit with Winston Wright back and the fact that you may not want your RB1 running back kicks, but man, he is so electric and he is so powerful when he does it that I think you may not want to take yourself a playmaker off the field. And then I like hot take alert. I literally just went with one hot take in this because you could have a couple of guys back there, like you could have Winston Wright doing this or not. But I like All Day Dre. I like Jacobs to be your punt returner this year. I think he is a dynamic athlete. I think that you have a lot of you got a lot of wide receivers and a lot of guys that you're trying to get the ball to, and, he may kind of get not buried on the depth chart, but he may be behind a couple of guys just with age and experience. But I do think that you want to try and get the ball in his hands as many ways as you can. So I think that Jacobs could be your punt returner. I think you could have Spann back there. I think you could have Winston Wright with the loss of Michael Pittman. But I'm going to go hot take on this and go with Jacobs as my punt returner. I don't think it's a hot take. I just think a little bit more surprising.
Yeah, I think Benson did a great job, and I think you'll see, Wright or Jacobs back there with him. And punt return could be anyone. Obviously, it would have been Micah Pittman. We don't even know if he'll be able to play in the 2023 season. I think Jacobs is a guy that teams are going to look at his practice film because in the transfer portal, they're shopping their practice film around that a lot of teams would want. So you have to find a way to get involved early. You have to keep everybody happy. So punt return, I would not be surprised at all to see him or Winston Wright or a combination of, letting them both get some reps and then see who they decide moving forward beyond that. Obviously, you open up with your two toughest games on the entire schedule in the first 4 weeks of the season. So you'd like to have it figured out heading into the season, but I can't complain or argue with much of what you have here, DJ.
When you look at this roster and you look at the depth chart and what we expect and what we think is going to happen, not a lot of questions, right? We're talking about, okay, well, who's the backup here? Who's the second string here? Who's the third string here? Whose waiver gets approved to be able to play on this position in the offensive line, or do you have to move somebody over? It's the most solidified we've ever been. That makes sense as Florida State brings back the most production in college football at 89%, according to Bill Connolly, I believe, does those. So pretty impressive. I think that the depth chart is something that isn't going to change a lot, and that's why we won't do this next week if we feel like things are almost exactly the same, or we may just provide small updates or slight updates. But I don't think things will really change a lot. I think if there are massive changes, we'll get back on here and do this. But this is what my depth chart would look like to start spring. We'll do another one coming out of the spring, maybe after the spring game, after we've seen what's going on. If you're coming to the spring game, if you watch this 25-minute video, come and hang out with us at the tailgate. You can get a link to that on Eventbrite. We'll put the link down in the description. With your tailgate tickets, you get about $40 worth of gift cards to Gramco, Guthrie's, Garnet and Gold, and Smoothie Time. They're in Tallahassee. Appreciate all of them for their support. Again, appreciate Gramco for their support in making this video happen and sponsoring it. Richie, it was a pleasure. Let's do this again. Let's recap this after the spring and, again, talk about how we're winning it all in 2023.